Today we are with the most esteemed Monsignor Esau Joseph, and coincidentally today is his 35th anniversary of being a priest. So, Father, welcome and thank you for your time and your service.
Yeah.
So can you share your journey into ministry and your calling to serve?
Okay. So first of all, thanks for giving me this opportunity of saying something because we are about the middle of the Lenten season, more or less. And I always call it the 3F, faith, feasting, and fasting. So those are the things I will try to go through in this talk. But just a little introduction about myself. So as you mentioned, I'm 55 years a priest today, on this very day, St. Joseph Day. At first, I was a very young person in the seminary trying to discern exactly what I wanted to do, but I was already qualified as a medical practitioner.
Right.
And I wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but eventually I saw it as an ideal way to give one's life to service of God and of other human beings. Of course, I was already in a service-oriented field, serving
Right.
people in the hospital, the poor, the sick, the needy, those in distress. And I was in the field of anesthesia and intensive care.
Okay.
So in the ICU now, you see so much areas of mortality and frailty and sickness, disease, death and dying, that it really shows you that, you could use your time to do something good as your journey through this world. And that was my way of perfect service to God and to
Right.
others.
Interesting. So what is the core purpose of Christianity today?
Right. So the church tries, in a very intense, difficult world that we live in, to give persons the opportunity for what we call integral human development. In other words, it's not about spiritual things alone, but moral behavior, ethical behavior, intellectual behavior, trying to have persons with character building qualities, giving persons the tools for the possibility that they can do some transforming attitudes to the world in which we live in. In other words, they try to contribute to the common good of all human beings. And I think that's the most essential part of the church, to
Interesting.
add to the common good of the world in which we live in.
So is caring for the body considered to be part of Christianity?
Yes, it's an integral part of the body in that caring for the human body, because it's almost like a spiritual responsibility of each human being to care for the human body, because we believe the body is sacred, made by the very hands of God Himself. And of course, there are part of the Psalms, for example, that will say God made us in the palm of His hands. Or the psalmist David will say, God knitted us, each one unique, special, different. Every part of our human being, psychological, spiritual, emotional, biochemical, all parts knitted together before we were born. And when the psalmist David realized that, every human being is so special, he will say, Oh God, thank you for the wonder of my being. So the human body was considered so sacred. And by extension, because God gave you this gift of life, we are supposed to take care of our bodies in a very, very special way. And so this season is very relevant in terms of that particular aspect of, caring for the human body
Yeah.
that God made with His own hands.
So in a sense, taking care of our body is a way of also honoring God's work.
Exactly so. The work of the creation of His own hands, and the work that He made in this world, we respect. And when persons care for their own selves, they also understand that they have to respect and care for other people as well, whom God also made with His own hands for a different purpose, a different journey, a different pilgrimage, a different contribution. So it helps in mutual respect to really care for the human being as, something sacred from God.
So in a sense, would you say that it is dishonoring God or disrespectful to God when we don't take care of ourselves?
I would say so. Or you disrespect God when you dehumanize another human being as well.
As well, yeah. Interesting. All right, so can you take us through the liturgical calendar?
Okay, so there are about 6 main seasons in the cycle of the church. You have Advent, which is about approximately 4 weeks, followed by Christmas tide period, as we call it. Then we have Lent, approximately 5 weeks or 40 days around there. Then we have something called the Triduum, and then we follow that with the Easter celebration, and then the ordinary time. The ordinary time is the most amount of weeks, about 33 weeks in the ordinary time. The Easter Triduum is the major of all the part of the calendar. These 3 important days that we call it. Triduum really means 3 days. So Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday. And those 3 days are considered the most sacred days in the calendar of the liturgical cycle. Indeed, the whole purpose of Lent is to prepare you for that 3 days, to celebrate it in a very meaningful way. We call it Easter mysteries. So Easter Sunday, for example, we call Easter Sunday the Sunday of all Sundays, because that's the day of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And through the whole 40 days, Christians, 40 days of prayer and fasting and pilgrimage and retreats and reflections and so on, it helped them better prepare for these 3 most important liturgical days. And of course, in the preparation, it goes with the fasting and the abstinence and the discipline of the human being in order to celebrate these events of our history and what Jesus did for us on those 3 days.
Right. So is it that the liturgical calendar more or less follows the chronological calendar?
More or less, I would say. So that like beginning of the year will be ordinary time, then you
Right.
have Lent, Easter, then ordinary time, then common close, you have September, October, November, then Advent start again, and then it end with Christmas, yeah.
Okay. And in conversation about the Triduum, you mentioned Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Sunday. What about Saturday, Glorious Saturday?
We also celebrate the resurrection on Glorious Saturday evening. It has to be a dark period after sunset. And from the evening of Glorious Saturday to the whole Sunday, we celebrate the resurrection. So that's also part of it as well.
Okay. So then, can you give us a little more information on the purpose of Lent?
Good. So it's a season for fasting, and of course, it's trying to imitate Jesus, who prayed and fasted for 40 days and 40 nights in the Judean desert. The desert is a difficult place to be in at that time, extremes of temperature, really hot during the day and cold in the night. And he did it for 40 days and 40 nights. And he did it deliberately before he went to his public ministry. Soon after he came on the desert, he knew what God wanted him to do, what his purpose was. Until the cross of Calvary, he went forward. So in the moment of prayer and fasting, he probably discerned his own self-purpose and, a reason of his being in the world that God sent him. Of course, in the desert, he defeated normal human temptations that a person would face. And the 40 days of Lent that the church tried to imitate is to imitate what Jesus went through in the desert. So, for example, the mystery of the desert, prayer, fasting, abstinence, almsgiving, all those things are included in our Lenten journey. And of course, the spiritual goal of all this prayer and discipline and fasting and repentance, as we call it, even in the desert, Jesus faced what we call the demon, the wild beasts, the wild beasts of the desert. As a reminder that during prayer and fasting of the Lenten season, every person have to come face to face with the demons of your life, each individual temptation in the wilderness. And of course, that also in turn entail the dark desires, the things like the appetites of the human being, the weaknesses, the earthly attractions that we run after, the imperfections, the frailty. So the whole aspect of Jesus conquering the human temptation is when we go through our 40 days during our fasting, we too get this better self-control. We are able to control the appetite for food, basically, which, as you know, is a basic human need and a human appetite. And because you're now able to control that, you have better self-control of the other weaknesses and appetites that may sometimes be a source of distraction. Advent and Lent, of course, is different. So Advent, it's more like a celebratory period. They call it a little Lent, but it's more like a celebratory period where you're preparing to celebrate a different part of the history of Jesus, that is to say, his birth, more or less, the incarnation, as we call it. So it's a joyful anticipation of Jesus coming to live among us as a human being, like us, with human needs, with human desires, and so on. So the whole 4 weeks of Advent is in preparation to celebrate that moment when God became one like us. During Advent, we also think about the second coming of Jesus, because he said he will come again, so we also think about that. So if you notice, the themes of Advent and Lent are different. So in Advent, we say we're hoping, we're waiting, we're longing, we're expecting, we're preparing, we're looking forward. And the Lenten season is a more rigorous period of prayer, of fasting, of discipline, of sacrifice, of thinking about the passion of Jesus, being able to control the desires of a human being, and the themes of self-denial and conversion and detachment. For the whole 40 days, we think about that. Even the symbols are different. You may notice, like at the church, for example, for Lent, it's more or less no flowers, kind of, the color purple. We have the reality of the cross, like the Station of the Cross, and the church is almost like in a deeply penitential season. Unlike Advent, it is a little penitential service, season 2, but you have symbols like the Advent wreath and decorations and flowers and Christmas tree and lights and all those other things. So even the symbols in the church, if you go to any church now, when you see the cross with a purple color, you know you're in Lent. But if you go to a church and you see the purple with the Advent wreath, you know in Advent. So visually, it also helps the human being to kind of appreciate the season that you're in based on the chronological calendar of the cycle.
Right. And during Lent, Christians are expected to give up some foods during the Lenten season. Can you tell us a little more about what the church asks persons to do?
So, as a medical doctor too, there's a very important question because there's always a balance between celebration and moderation and fasting and feasting. So today, for example, is St. Joseph Day. So it's a little break in Lent where people have a chance to feast and to fast and to celebrate and so. And of course, this season is different from Easter and Christmas where there's big celebration and big consumption of these things. But I think the Lenten season is a reminder we always have to be careful what we consume. So, for example, it's generally accepted that Western society, as we know it, eat unhealthy sometimes. Unhealthy fast foods, you have processed foods, you have food with added sugars, food with unhealthy saturated fats, as you know, low intake of plant-based foods. And this has led to a lot of things like chronic diseases, obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer. So in the Lenten season, when we focus on prayer and fasting and abstaining from food, is a reminder that the Bible expects us to take care of ourselves and be very careful what we consume, to have that self-control. So it's a universal, fasting is really a universal discipline in all the religions, to remind them that you have to be careful about what you consume. And once you're able to control that desire for food, you're better able to deal with all the other desires of a human being, natural desires and the attractions of this world and the distractions of this world. So a simple thing like abstaining from food help the person spiritually. And of course, there are many biblical references for this. In the Bible, for example, gluttony, overeating, or overindulgence is seemed to be like it is mentioned as a deadly sin because it does damage to the human being as well as maybe deprive another person from benefiting from what God has given to you. So the church during this time of Lent will always advise moderation. Think about the other person. We can choose healthy lifestyle. We can choose sober means of living, simpler means of living, moderate means of living. We can share what we have with those who have no need, no, who are in need for these things. And of course, it helps us to live healthier lifestyle. And the basic thing, diet, exercise, all those things we think about. So not only fasting, it's a reminder the body is sacred, and the fasting help us understand that we have to limit certain things that we consume that can make us unhealthy. So many examples you could give. Fried, sugary food is a common thing these days anywhere you turn, and that again is unhealthy. Or choosing food that are low in sugar content. That's a healthy choice during Lent. And some people may not necessarily be able to fast from food per se, but a simple thing like that, choosing a low sugar yogurt or something could be a good choice. And of course, you should choose healthy hydrating fluids or soups or things like hydrating fluids, natural liquids and juices and all those things, not too sweet, can help the human being choose a healthy way of living. And of course, hydrate the body, which is important because the dry season now and the temperature is really
very
high.
hot. Yeah.
All those simple basic things included in the discipline of fasting. So is fasting from food, yes, but is bodily internal discipline as well.
Right. So it's not only the tradition of don't eat meat during Lent.
It's more than that, yes, it's
Okay.
more than that, yeah.
Okay. So then what would you say is the spiritual goal of fasting during Lent? Should it be discipline? Should it be repenting? Should it be getting more spiritual clarity? What is it?
It's always, again, it goes with the cycle in which we go through during the Lenten season. So, even food has a spiritual meaning. So, abstaining from food is to remind us that, self discipline, self control, self knowledge, you get to learn about yourself. Even Jesus, when he was tempting the devil, he said, man does not live on bread alone. So it's a reminder that is much more than the human need that we look at. In other words, there's a spiritual part of our being that we have to tend to. So even Jesus, food is a blessing from God, but he will use it in a way after he came to the public ministry, to this public ministry, he will share food. He'll go by the tax collectors, the sinners, nobody who will eat with them. And he will have this, what they call table fellowship. So in his fasting, he saw the inclusion of God around this common table. And in our fasting too, at the end of the 40 days, when we celebrate the Last Supper, for example, on Holy Thursday, when Jesus again gave food a different meaning. He said, from now on, this is my body, this is my blood. And it gives you a new meaning that just as the human body need this food and protein and carbohydrates to survive, the part of us that God made, the spirit, also need the supernatural food that Jesus instituted. So they are both linked up, physical and spiritual. And in fact, the whole Lenten season is a model of what Jesus did in the wilderness. And I think it's only for your own self, but when you deny yourself of the pleasures of having excessive and overindulgence and overeating, when you kind of restrain that, you understand how people feel who are hungry, who don't know where the next meal is coming from, who have no food to share with their families. It gives you an appreciation of what others may be feeling. And that, again, is part of journeying and solidarity from the Lenten season to other people as well. Now, remember fasting in Lent. Jesus was hungry for food after 40 days. But the hunger that he also had, that was more for food. When I say man doesn't live on bread alone, is a reminder that us, when we fast, we hunger for things like justice, fairness. We hunger for equality. We hunger for peace in the world that we are living in now. We hunger for people who are in need for charity and basic utilities. Some people hunger for basic things like electricity, water, clean food. So it's a reminder that the hunger goes beyond not modern food, but for basic things that we as Christians have to work for and share with other people as well.
Yeah, interesting. So in Trinidad and Tobago, we have plenty holidays and we have food as the center of most of it. So when there's Christmas to Easter, how should we balance celebration with moderation in these modern times?
Right. So again, it's an important thing because of the health issues involved with food and we said overindulgence. Again, we talk about, mentioned before, the chronic diseases that we have, obesity. There's a strong association with these chronic disease and the dietary habits and how people eat and so on. So Lent is always a reminder that whether it's Christmas or the different celebrations we go through, always be careful about what we consume. Avoid excessive processed foods with the added sugar or unhealthy saturated fats. Increase the intake of plant-based things, and these things help persons control things like chronic disease, diabetes, hypertension, obesity,
High
all those
cholesterol.
things, control. So it's a good season to remind people that even in the times when we're celebrating Christmas and Easter and birthdays and anniversaries and so on, there's a limit to what we should be and do not go beyond that and overindulge. Of course, as a reminder, as we said, the body is sacred. So even that we do, the diet, the exercises, the restraint is for a good, holistic, healthy living and helps us on the progress to know that we made the best use of this body that God has given to us. I would say faith leaders and dietitians, they echo the same messages, basically, yeah? Because, I mean, we all want to see people healthy, less people go into the clinics and so on. So, many examples we could give. So, complex carbohydrates and, high fiber vegetable diet. Things like whole wheat and brown rice and rolled oats and so on. It assists a person in preventing glycemic spikes and so on. And so,
So would you say that diet is something the church should speak a little more about?
we should, especially during Lenten season, to remind people that there's a choice that we have.
So has modern culture moved us away from healthy diets, would you say?
I would say because the fast food and the fast life and everything is in a speed, people probably don't have the time to sit down and cook a proper, healthy, balanced diet. And things like, the consumption of these foods that we're not too sure what the content would be, or if it will spike your sugar, or if they have unsaturated fats and too much content. Those things can be harmful. So we have to emphasize that people need now to look at their health and see in what way they could pay attention to dietary requirements.
Right. So would you say that feasting is meant to symbolize abundance and blessing?
In a way, in the Bible, there are many, many examples of feast day celebrations, and of course, we have them in what we call the life transitions. Like a baby is born, right? That's a big celebration, a new life. So baptism, for example, is a cause of celebration, a feast day. New life, being born in the church, the sacrament of baptism, leading them to the other sacraments that Jesus instituted. Weddings are another feast day because, two persons becoming one by God and a new life and a new family and signs of all the contribution that they make to the church and to the world. Even funerals from life to death. Of course, it's a time of sadness and sorrow and grief and bereavement, but it's from a Christian point of view is also seen as a celebratory transition
Right.
from death to life. So some people after the funeral ceremony have a
Go and
big
eat,
celebration,
have a meal, a family meal.
family meal. And it's important because it gives them that solidarity and the fact that they are journeying together with people and that bonding, that community bonding, that it is so essential to help them on this particular journey of accepting the reality that the person is gone, but they still have friends around to celebrate and to rejoice with. And that bonding and solidarity is a cause for great celebration of. And again, in the midst of all of that, we still have to be careful. Don't overindulge. Always be careful. Don't go to the point where it's causing more harm than good. So celebration with moderation and joy is always a delicate balance of two scales, how we go about it.
So are there opportunities to rethink how we should celebrate? Without losing joy, because we do know, especially in our culture in Trinidad and Tobago, in some sense, food equals love.
Right.
Somebody give you a bag of mango, you want to share with others. Or Christmas time is a time you celebrate time spent with your family, but it is easy to overindulge sometimes. But we really are trying to share or tell persons we love them, but we use food as an example or as an expression of the said love. So how, is that a conversation we should begin to talk about, how we should rethink other ways to celebrate and to express love?
It's a conversation that's very important because of the high incidence of chronic disease in our own country. There's almost like an epidemic.
Right.
And then I think is also a self-exploration of yourself. If you're diabetic, you have to be really careful. During the Lenten season, you don't want to get hypoglycemia or... In fact, anybody with a chronic disease in the Lenten season should really go to their practitioner and ask, what are my limitations of things?
And fasting.
Of fasting and abstinence, because you don't want to get hypoglycemia or you don't want to get, problems of dizziness and fainting. And we don't usually, even in the celebratory form, we don't usually encourage persons who have health dietary restrictions. We know we advise them before. And sometimes people cater for them too, in a special way. But there's also a self-exploration of yourself. What are your boundaries? What are your limits? How much you could take? How much cups you could take? How much sweets you could take? How much ice cream you could take? And try to pay attention to that. And so much more discussion should be based on those things so that persons know exactly what is involved. So even in big celebration, there will be joy and celebration in moderation. And even if you can't partake what the others are doing, you still celebrate
Right.
in a way that is fitting to your particular physiology, biochemistry, and your needs.
So for the persons who don't know, what is hypoglycemia?
So normally your sugar should be between 80 to 100 milligrams per DL. So that if it falls below 70, you get signs of hypoglycemia and
feel dizzy,
dizziness and
right,
fainting and sweating and so even those persons who are thinking about fasting, they should have some way of getting, like, for example, a sugary drink close by, just in case that they get
their sugar levels drop too low.
Too low.
Right.
And even the normal diabetics too, they should maintain their sugar level based on their carbohydrate requirements and so.
On a Sunday or morning or before Mass, I should say, it is advised to fast or not have anything before you receive the Eucharist. Any advice on that for persons who may have chronic disease?
Well, there are exemptions. The elderly or those with chronic disease is not a rigid requirement for them. because of course you don't want them fainting away in the church or getting hypoglycemic. So again, is each individual needs and requirements based on what the person could tolerate and can do, especially during the Lenten season. We don't really advise pregnant women or mothers with nursing babies,
Breastfeeding mummies.
or even children, especially those children who go into school and who have to study. We don't advise them to fast during the Lenten season, but each person is different and they have to know what that person could do. And people tell you, I say, I'm going to give up one thing, chocolate, so I'm going to give up one thing, too much of soft drinks. And they can choose and base on what their particular body can tolerate and what is beneficial for them. But even that helps them in the same rigid fasting, like self-control. I didn't do it for 40 days. I can control my emotion. I know my needs. I have better self-management, better knowledge about, so it's really is a physical entity food, but it has a lot of spiritual
Meaning behind it.
And even Ash Wednesday, as you know, when we began the Lenten season, even the ashes, like, is a form, they used it as a form of cleansing in those days, the Old Testament days. They cleansed pots and pans. And gradually the people saw it, well, this is a symbol of how you can cleanse your soul. And so the ancient Jews used to use it. Like Job, for example, will sit down in ashes when he really was repentant. Or the king of Nineveh will sit down in ashes and they will paint their body to remind them of their frailty, that the human body is transient. We're only passing through this world. Let us take care of the body. One day we'll... And the way we start the Ash Wednesday, you remember, we say, remember you are dust, and unto dust you shall return. Until that time comes, take care of this treasure that God has given to us, the human body.
Right.
Both spiritually, physically, psychologically, and all the other ways that the human body is made up. Complex, but yet manageable.
So then, as humans, from one Lenten season to the next, does that mean that if we were to follow the teachings of the church and, everything you've discussed with us so far, that we should see some growth in our different aspects of our lives from one season to the next? Or there should be some sort of, I should say, building in terms of what you may have given up in one Lenten season to the next Lenten season?
Well, it's always a period of growth, and as I said, there's more desire for food, so that the person has better control of yourself, and it's also about self-knowledge.
Right.
Because at the end of the 40 days, it's, oh, I am able to control that desire. Well, therefore, I have better, self-management of my time. And because the person has been fasting, as Jesus showed us, they see things that you normally wouldn't think about, Oh, that person must be in need for food. Let me work for peace. Let me work for justice. Oh, that widow has lost her rights. That person is in need for something. So you kind of understand a human being a little more. So yeah, you're right. After many Lenten seasons, you ought to grow in terms of this cascade of being a better person who contributes something good to this world.
Yeah. That also requires a level of consciousness.
And self-knowledge, I would say.
person,
Self-knowledge and consciousness to know. And it with advancing age too, you really see, how this Lenten season is important, because it's a total imitation of what Jesus did, what he achieved for us, and trying to walk in his footsteps, basically. Because we could never do what he did. We can certainly try,
Yeah. So what has fasting taught you personally?
Right. So it has helped a lot in terms of well, of course, we began the Lenten season by Jesus saying, whatever you do should be done in secret, and your right hand should not know what your left hand doing, and what your Father see in secret, he will reward you. So I always see the Lenten season as something, a kind of personal contribution to Jesus. But yes, fasting, well, from food and from things that we desire, has taught me particularly to have some better self-control of yourself. Try to realize that you're just passing through this place for a limited time. All of us have physical desires, and these cannot go overboard. You have to keep them within control. Discipline, self-discipline is another thing, and self-management. You're better able to manage yourself. St. Paul used to say, because of his prayer and fasting, he make his body obey him. So it's almost like, you're trying to subdue things that will normally lead you astray. And there's something too. You see, restraining, for me, restraining from something you like to eat and delaying immediate gratification. It goes beyond that. So sometimes your desire for something else, and it's you better control. So delayed gratification, wait, persevere, endure. And those things come with time. After many Lenten seasons, you begin to see development and growth in these particular areas.
So for the persons who might say, Father, I don't know how to do this restraint, this restraint thing, how to start, where to begin, how exactly does one practice restraint?
Well, the person has to really know yourself, and know what, and there's a kind of radical honesty about what it is in your life that is harmful, what can lead you astray, what are your aims and your goals, and so. And even the Lenten season at the end is supposed to purify. What am my role in life? What is my purpose? What is my goal? What is my aspiration? You notice what Jesus did after he fasted. He came straight to the public ministry. He knew what he wanted to do until he died on the cross. There was no turning back.
Right.
So even simple fasting help a person understand their purpose of being. It kind of clarify your goal in life, what you want to do, and even your achievements is based on, of course, like if somebody is working to become a doctor or a lawyer or a good dietitian or an engineer, they have to give up things that will waste your time, the things that will cause you to lie and go astray and fail your exam and don't study your work. And that start off very simple. I was fasting. I can control my desire for food. Therefore, I can control my desire to lie and to waste my time and to go the wrong way. And it really gives you the self-discipline to achieve what a person wants to achieve in life. And that's the way I see it in my own life.
Right.
That self-discipline and order and purpose and being and goals and all those things. Even when persons are fasting, it goes with prayer. So a person may be simple thing like a simple fast, just keeping away from meat today, or keeping away from sugary drinks today. In the fasting, they will pray, Lord, I would like you to accept this fasting for a particular purpose. So go hand in hand with the prayer. Once Jesus said, pray always for the strength. So even the ability to face sorrow and distress and disappointment, chronic disease and all those things, even the ability to pray, to survive those things, come through prayer and fasting. Is one episode in the life of the very apostles. They were not able to help a man. And they went to Jesus and said, we cannot help this man at all. He says, sometimes in life, some problems could only be approached through prayer and fasting. And again, that's one of the main message of the Lenten season, to help people see it as a period to really search and do some spiritual inventory of your own life, see where you are, what you could improve in. Every Lenten season is a reminder we haven't reached perfection as yet. There is something God trying to tell us we could work on. And we can do it through simple means of prayer and fasting.
So then would you say that by gaining spiritual fulfillment, it helps us to manage or maintain our physical needs?
Yeah, because with the spiritual fulfillment, there goes many other things, like peace. A person who live in peace with himself. You come to terms of this self-knowledge deep within who you are. And as the psalmist David, celebrate who you are deep within. So you have that peace, as the Bible said, that the world cannot give or take away from us. It's often said that persons who pray often and fast, there's less worry and less stress because they leave it at the hands of God and whatever God wants to do. So there's less stress. So even that, if we internalize that, is a healthy thing for the human being. And I mentioned the sense of purpose. And there is a theory, a person who turn to God in prayer and fasting somehow have a higher energy level to achieve because, of course, they depend on a supernatural help that is not from this earth. So prayer and fasting really and truly like elevate purify the person's sense of being. So even the energy level rises to achieve.
Right. So
So
you said something just now, celebrate who you are deep within. How would you put that in relation to even your birthday? So, example, there are some persons that believe that their birthday is not worth celebrating. Any comments on that?
you have to always see it in terms from a perspective of God as a giver of all life.
Right.
So, I mean, even when a baby is conceived is a reason to celebrate because God has a purpose for that particular being.
Right.
And as we said at the beginning, when God took his time and carved somebody in the palm of his hands or knitted somebody, that person is born to contribute something to this world. So that's why we don't believe in euthanasia or abortion or murder and so on, because these people were created for a purpose. But there's a good reason to celebrate because that's the day that God willed it that you should be born on the planet. And there's a part of the Ecclesiastes that says there's a time and place for everything under heaven. So, I mean, birthdays are a great reason to celebrate the fact that God allow you to be born at that particular time, on that particular day, in this particular year for a reason, a purpose, a journey, a contribution, a pilgrimage. That's a reason for celebrating.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what message would you leave those struggling with self-control, health, or even spiritual and emptiness?
Okay, so those with health issues, as a practitioner, I would always say go to your primary health physician. And of course, we have many health centers established in our own country. They could get a basic physical, and if the doctors pick up anything, parameters that may be abnormal, they will send them to the proper referral center. And so the health is your wealth. Check on it regularly. And I know most of the health centers, every 6 months, they do the basic screening and so that is important. In terms of self-control and spiritual emptiness, the whole Lenten season is meant to remind us that nobody could fill that void in our spirit unless God himself does something. So there's a part of the Psalms, I think, that says, sometimes without God, you're like a dry, weary land without water. Or the part of the Old Testament that said, if you don't put God as a part of it, you will labor in vain. And so, as we said during the Lenten season, the prayer is like the oxygen to the spiritual life. So it gives life to that part of us, that spiritual being. And of course, fasting gives us better self-management, better self-control. Even almsgiving in Lent, we read this during Lent too, be compassionate as your Father is compassionate. Be merciful as your Father is merciful. Be generous as your Father is generous. So even in almsgiving, given to someone who is in need, or someone who is in distress, or sharing the extra food with the hungry, it makes us more godlike, more like God himself who cares for every single human being. And even that, I think, is part of the filling of that spiritual life during Lent, that God give us that grace to become like that, to realize that when we fast, we see that other people are in need of these things and we try to alleviate their hunger, their pain, their agony. And of course, as a priest, I must mention the sacraments, so people's spiritual emptiness. The sacraments were given to us by Jesus to fill that void in the human being. So just as our body need healthy food, the spiritual part of us, Jesus said, this is my body, eat it, this is my blood, drink it. And that's like food for the journey, spiritual life. He said, cut off from that, you could achieve nothing in life because the strength that you get from that helps us become more like Him as we journey through this world. So the emptiness within a human being filled with this bread that He Himself gave us, food for the journey, really and truly. He said it, huh? He said He lives in us, we live in Him. So He become part of us, we become part of Him. So that void is filled again by food, but a different kind of food.
And spiritual food.
Spiritual food, yeah.
Right. So you mentioned prayer as one of the things that would help someone experiencing spiritual emptiness. Now, for someone who never learned how to pray, any words for them? Is there like a guideline on how to pray or a structure of a specific type of prayer?
Well, even the apostles, when many chosen ones, they came to Jesus once and said, Lord, teach us to pray. And He gave us what we call the model of all prayers, the Our Father. So if somebody go through the Our Father prayer slowly, you really explore the things that we spoke about. That Our Father, He's my Father who made me. And then you begin to establish a kind of relationship. How many times He fed us, gave us this day our daily bread. How many times He forgive us. How many times He save us from evil. And so you get an appreciation. And from that prayer, the other prayer will naturally flow. Giving God the honor and the glory and the praise for what He has done for us. And sometimes we take this for granted, when we say, and it's always a kind of inclusive prayer. So a person during the Lenten season, you never say, I'm praying for my daily bread every day and my safety and things. It's always inclusive. Our Father, our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses. So it's a kind of prayer that reminds us we are not only praying to God alone, but we're also praying for other people that we journey with, especially persons who in close proximity to us, and of course those in need, most in need. So I would say prayer naturally flows out from a relationship with God. And if anybody explore the Our Father prayer, you must get inclinations to kind of explore who exactly is this man who made me. And who cares? Jesus said the rain fall on everybody, the sun shine on everybody. Who care for so many different people? And prayer becomes natural after that when a communication to God, spiritually, bodily, and a relationship develops, and then of course things flow naturally. Many times, even in the life of a priest, if a person stop communicating those things to God or stop praying and things drift away, a friendship has broken and it's easy to drift away. So prayer keeps us on, as Jesus said, the straight and narrow road that leads to life. And that's why He prayed and fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, to give Him that clarity of accomplishing what God wanted Him to do in this world, hoping that we too will follow every Lenten season that we go through.
Yeah. Thank you very much for everything you have discussed with us. You've given us quite a lot to think about. And it is also an honor for me to have this conversation with you. Also, I don't know if you remember, but when I started working as a dietitian, you were my first supervisor.
Okay.
And we used to call you Father Dr. Joe. So,
Yes.
it is an honor for me to have this conversation with you now on the other side of things from the spiritual aspect. All right. So thank you very much.
Thank you also for giving me an opportunity to explain. There's so many more things we could go through, but of course,
Yeah.
and the Lenten season is always appropriate to explore the dimension of food and the spirit and the needs and the self-restraint that is so important in the world in which we live in. Hopefully, we'll reach a point where we will all think about eating healthy.
Any closing blessings or words for our listeners?
Well, as a priest, we always wish persons, at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, that you really celebrate this great triumph. The night Jesus instituted the Last Supper for us, the night He died for us and paid the price for our sins and for our redemption and for our salvation, and of course the glorious resurrection on the Sunday. So St. Paul said, if there were no resurrection, the human being would be a wretched entity. But because of the resurrection, He has given us hope that even though we die, all is not lost. And so we live life to the fullest until the very end. So hopefully at the end of the 40 days, I wish all those who are celebrating, a meaningful Holy Thursday, a good Friday to realize how good this man was to us by giving his life. And of course, the triumph of the Easter Sunday, that light always triumph over darkness, goodness always over evil, life over death. And with God, there are no endings, but only new beginnings as we journey along. So,
Thank you.
welcome.